We recently continued watching Taehyung at Paris Fashion Week, and once again it's amazing how he always manages to impress us with his presence. Every appearance of his seems like a moving work of art, and no matter how many times we see him, his elegance and charm manage to surprise us as if it were the first time. It's impossible not to smile when we see him, impossible not to feel that little warmth in our chest when he walks with such confidence, radiating a beauty that seems to come from within. Taehyung was so real when he mentioned he would eat a pistachio croissant with that sweet tone and that disarming smile. It's such a simple detail, but it reflects his entire essence, a man who enjoys life's small pleasures with an authenticity that captivates. And yes, he really did eat that croissant, and as he did, there was something about his expression, the way his eyes lit up, that made you want to stop time. He's adorable, so naturally charming, that for a moment everything around him seems to fade away. But of course, the schedule must go on. It seemed like they had to leave, and just as the movement was starting, Taehyung, with his characteristic touch of spontaneous humor, said, "No way without my croissant." It was one of those moments that show why he's so beloved. He can be in the middle of the glamour of Paris, surrounded by flashbulbs and designers, and still maintain his playful spirit, his warmth intact. It's incredibly beautiful to watch him walk and eat at the same time, as if it were all part of a smooth and natural choreography. And then, as if perfection needed further proof, he appears with a leopard tie, and then, a shirt with the same print. This man is truly beautiful. Whatever he wears, he transforms it into something worthy of admiration. Every piece of clothing seems to come alive on him, every detail highlighting his poise and elegance. It's not just the clothes, but the way he wears them, that magnetic presence that requires no effort to stand out. However, beyond his impeccable style, what truly makes him shine is his aura. There's something about Taehyung that transcends fashion, that goes beyond cameras and events. It's his way of being, kind, respectful, always with that smile that seems to brighten even the grayest days. That's why crowds gather, why people travel, wait, watch. They don't just want to see him, they want to feel that glow he gives off. Taehyung doesn't walk, he floats among the gazes, and his every gesture leaves a silent but profound mark. It's impossible not to admire you when, 1 second, you can be that powerful, elegant, and sexy man who takes your breath away, and the next, you become the tender, adorable boy who inspires infinite tenderness. And therein lies the magic of Kim Taehyung, the ability to be art and soul at the same time, to make the world stop just to look at him. A moment with you is enough to understand why so many hearts beat faster at the sight of you. Between the sophisticated charm of the man and the sincere sweetness of the child that still lives inside you, lies the true power of Kim Taehyung. In the relationship between Taehyung and Jungkook, there's something that always draws attention, something that doesn't depend on words, but on the gestures that escape without thinking. It's not what they say that reveals what they feel, but what they do without even trying. When they're close, everything about them changes. It's as if the air between them takes on a different weight, warmer, softer, filled with a silent energy that only they seem to understand. They touch without fear, as if their hands naturally find their way to each other. They approach each other with a trust that needs no explanation, as if no barriers or possible distance existed between them. And they look at each other with a naturalness that leaves no room for doubt, a gaze that doesn't seek to be seen, but that when it meets, says more than any words. It happens not once or twice, but constantly, almost instinctively, as if that closeness were already part of their way of life, of their way of living together in every space they share. And that's precisely what makes many people not see it as something temporary or casual. Because the gestures they share are too sincere, too natural to be part of a simple show. There are moments when you only have to observe them to notice that there's no intention to impress, but rather a truth that flows on its own. And that's where everything changes without anyone noticing. Taehyung's live performance yesterday was one of those moments that leave a warm and meaningful feeling, a small but sincere space where it was clear there was no acting or script. He decided to speak mostly in Japanese and Chinese, and he did so with a calmness that revealed how comfortable he felt. He spoke slowly, smiled with a serene sweetness, and his voice sounded close, as if he were conversing with someone very dear. Between laughs and soft phrases, he mentioned that he had dinner with his family and a very close friend, someone who was also very dear to his family. That phrase, said without much emphasis, was enough to ignite a chain of interpretations. It was enough for everyone listening to understand, without needing names, who he was referring to. Because when Taehyung talks about someone who shares intimate moments with their family, when he casually mentions a close friend, many people's minds travel to the same place, to the same person, Jungkook. And while some prefer to close their eyes to the obvious, the truth sneaks in between the words. What isn't said is felt. What isn't shown is guessed. Because when two people are so close, the signs appear on their own, without needing to look for them. And there's something very clear about them: when two people act, the intention to impress is evident. There's an invisible distance between the gesture and the purpose. But when two people truly understand each other, they don't need to plan anything, they don't seek out glances, they don't force coincidences, they just flow. And that's exactly what happens with Taehyung and Jungkook. They don't seek each other out for attention, they seek each other out because that's how their bond works. It's a habit, a need that arises from affection and habit. They're used to being close, to touching each other without fear, to looking at each other with sincerity. Every touch, every glance, every shared smile isn't an attempt to prove something, but a way of being, a way of saying "here I am" without saying a single word. They do it without realizing it, effortlessly, because that's who they are. And when something is repeated so many times, so naturally, it ceases to be a coincidence. Because it's no coincidence that their hands accidentally meet, nor that their gazes coincide even in the midst of noise. It's no coincidence that they seek each other out in silence, that they share gestures that seem insignificant to others, but that carry weight between them. All of this is part of a story that is written without words, a story that needs no confirmation. And although many try to reduce it to a simple game, there's something in their way of being together that disarms any attempt to deny it. It's that naturalness that makes it real, that constant repetition of gestures that can't be faked. Because coincidences happen once, but when something is repeated so much, so often, so equally, it ceases to be a coincidence. Taehyung's live broadcast yesterday was one of those moments that leave a warm and meaningful feeling, a space where he decided to speak mostly in Japanese and Chinese, revealing his comfort and ease in communicating with those who follow him in different languages. What was interesting was that, amid laughter and soft phrases, he mentioned that he had dinner with his family and a very close friend, someone who was also very dear to his family. That simple sentence was enough to ignite all possible interpretations, because we all know perfectly well who Taehyung was referring to, his Jungkook, even if some prefer to close their eyes to the evidence and continue denying what is so clear. As Taehyung spoke, he carefully searched for the exact Japanese word for close, a word that can also mean dear. He repeated it several times, as if he wanted to make sure his message was understood precisely. This insistence was no coincidence, because when something has emotional weight, words are pronounced with a different tone, and that was exactly what it felt like. This friend he spoke of isn't a mere acquaintance, he's someone truly important to him and his family, someone who occupies a place not everyone can reach. And it's impossible to ignore the fact that if it were anyone else, Taehyung would have said their name without hesitation, but by mentioning Jungkook, he knows perfectly well the attention it would generate, the stir it would cause, the number of interpretations that would follow. That caution is also a sign of protection, a way of protecting what's his and keeping safe what he loves. And with Taehyung's departure for the airport, everything began to make even more sense. The dates don't lie. Shusik begins on Monday the 6th and lasts 3 days, until Wednesday the 8th, a sacred time for Korean families, a time when everyone gathers to share, give thanks, and be together. However, Taehyung is scheduled to be away on those exact days, which indicates that his family, along with his beloved Jungkook, met with him before his departure, sharing that special dinner he mentioned. Of course, it's evident that this dinner didn't happen on the last night before the trip, because that night was surely reserved just for the two of them, for Taehyung and Jungkook, the lovebirds who always find a way to have their own space, away from the eyes of the world. These are the small possibilities that many of us prefer to believe, not as absolute truths, but as loving interpretations, theories based on gestures, glances, and coincidences that are repeated too precisely to be mere coincidences. But what is undeniable is that Taehyung and Jungkook always leave us with those small signs, details that seem minimal but have enormous meaning when observed closely. Thinking about all of this, as Taehyung flies, it's impossible not to remember that moment when he openly said that Jungkook is his family. He said it naturally, and he never lied about it. Today, seeing everything that's happened, that phrase makes even more sense. It feels more real and deeper than ever. Remembering those words is almost necessary, because they explain many of the actions the two have had over time. It wasn't a random phrase, it was an affirmation of affection, of belonging, of union. That's why those who still think Taehyung was referring to someone other than Jungkook are ignoring the obvious, and they can go argue with a wall if they want, because the facts speak for themselves.